Let's go now to Shadow Foreign Minister Michaelia Cash. Joins us live from Canberra. Good to talk to you again, Senator. First up, I've got to get your thoughts on Larissa Waters there. She is blaming victims, surely. Such thoughts surely don't even have a place in the Senate, but I mean, she's there democratically elected. Is she fit to sit in the Senate if she's blaming Israel for all the terrorism directed against Jews?
Well, I can assure you I do not agree with Larissa Waters' views. In fact, I would hope that the majority of Australians don't agree with them, because ultimately, I've said this before, Chris, and I'll say it again, I have a very simple principle. Hamas are terrorists. You do not reward terrorists. You stand with Israel, the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. Do the Greens not understand that Hamas are not just dedicated to the destruction of Israel? They're actually backed, funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, who hate the West. They hate everything that you and I stand for. So quite frankly, I find the comments of the leader of the Australian Greens utterly appalling. But I have to say, Chris, I've now worked with the Australian Greens for a long time, and sadly, they're unsurprising. But I will never make excuses for terrorists who hate everything that I stand for on a daily basis and want to see my values destroyed.
What about the ignorance, though, of a party leader, a senator and party leader, who thinks we'd have an ambassador in Gaza dealing with Hamas?
Oh, well, I have to say, you put three scenarios, A, B and C, and let me tell you, it's not going to be have a cup of tea. But again, you have to go back to basic fundamentals. You stand and you fight for Israel. Why? Because they are the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. They share, Chris, the same values that you and I share. The reason we can have this conversation is because we are part of the free world that values freedom of speech. The only reason Larissa Waters can say what she says is because of free speech, which is part of our Western values. And yet she is prepared to stand up and go into bat for Hamas, funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, who hate everything that we stand for. Sometimes in life you just have to shake your head, and this is one of those moments, Chris.
It sure is. Let's go to the peace plan that's been put together by Donald Trump. We all hope it works, but I've been surprised how bullish he's been about it, because you get nothing from Hamas. They haven't signed up to it, and they're obviously stringing things along for a while. How much optimism do you have about Hamas actually effectively surrendering, putting down their weapons and, most importantly, handing back the hostages?
Well, I have to say, I give Donald Trump credit in terms of, whilst Mr Albanese was overplaying the theatre of the United Nations and giving Hamas, and I quote, the fruits of October 7th in rewarding them with the recognition of a Palestinian state, President Trump was getting us one step closer to peace. I mean, even if his peace plan doesn't solve everything, it has isolated Hamas. That is a good thing. It actually now has the Arab states and even the majority Muslim states working with Israel, and America, the United States, have reasserted themselves on that diplomatic stage. So I have to say, I think President Trump, if he can pull this off, and I think that we are each day a step closer towards that happening. But even if it doesn't solve anything, you have now seen a major realignment in the Middle East, and that is a good thing. But Hamas also need to understand the ball is now squarely in their court. Release the hostages, disarm. You will no longer have any role in governing Gaza. Your people will be free of your terrorist reign, and we can finally take concrete steps towards ending this war. But the ball's in Hamas's court, Chris.
Look, the Arab support for this is crucial, as you say. In many ways, it's
absolutely crucial.
Extension of the Abraham Accords in Donald Trump's first term. And by extension, if they back this peace plan, they also back Israel and America's commitment to eliminate Hamas if they don't sign up to it. So one way or the other, we should see an end to this conflagration. Let's hopefully it happens in the peaceful surrender rather than more fighting to eliminate what's left of Hamas. I want to come back to domestic politics and the coalition. What sort of a front bench can you have when you've got two leading lights that you know well, Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price and Andrew Hastie on the backbench? They're leading lights of your party, and they're not only wasted on the backbench, they're obviously going to be a focus for anybody who wants an alternative approach or even alternative leadership.
I think both Jacinta and Andrew are incredibly strong performers, and I think actually regardless of whether they're on the backbench or the front bench, they will both continue to make an incredibly strong contribution. Ultimately, as a coalition, Chris, we need to be focused on this appalling government. Talking about ourselves does nothing to garner faith in the Australian people that we are a viable alternative. I can tell you what my focus is going to be on this week. You have a Prime Minister, a Minister for Home Affairs, Tony Burke, and a Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, who under their government have now seen the return of the ISIS brides. And what are they saying to the Australian people? There's nothing to see here. My focus is squarely going to be on holding this disastrous government to account, and that is what the Australian people, they deserve it, but I think they also expect us. They want us to be a strong opposition.
You're dead right, Michaelia Cash. That's what you need to do. But the fact that that's not happening, the fact that we're hearing more about the opposition fighting amongst itself rather than the attacks on the government, doesn't that show that Susan Lee is failing?
I disagree. I think that 5 months after what is possibly or is the most devastating election loss in our time, we are working through a process. We are working through policies and we're looking at what we can actually take to the next election. I actually don't think it's unusual that you are having these conversations. But what I do want to focus on every single day is having these conversations internally, not through the press and not externally. But as I said, in particular, these women left Australia, the ISIS brides, to actually join a death cult. And Mr Albanese, Tony Burke and Penny Wong, they think there's nothing to see here. To me, that is a fundamental difference, Chris, between the opposition and the Albanese government. We will always put Australia and the safety of Australians first. We're not going to make excuses for these ISIS brides.
Does that mean you block their return?
And that is where my focus is.
They're Australian citizens. How would you have blocked their return?
They are Australian citizens, and the question is, what did this government do, whether by its own hands or by its departments, to facilitate their return? Because the children were not born here. They did not have passports. They did not have travel documents. So I want to know exactly what the government and the department's roles were in facilitating these and how quickly they did that. But not only that, they are now here. Where are they? What are the monitoring conditions? Have people been advised that they are now back in the community? There are now so many questions that this government needs to answer. But ultimately, from my perspective, this is just another fundamental failing of a government that doesn't take the safety and security of Australians seriously. But worse than that, when questioned about it in the Parliament, in both the Senate, Chris, and the House of Representatives, they say there's nothing to see here.
Thanks for joining us, Michaelia Cash. Spot on. There are a lot of questions to be answered over that, and no doubt we'll get more questions in Parliament. We ran out of time there. The other thing I wanted to mention just in passing is that Papua New Guinea defence agreement. We talked the other week about how it had been delayed and imperilled. It was signed in Canberra today. So that's good news. That's a smart bit of diplomacy done by the Albanese Labor government with PNG. It was in doubt there for a while, but they've managed to sign that today.